Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. 2011 Ford F150 5.0 liter VIN F. Water pump replacement, belt replacement, 2 belts. And we're going to do a couple of the hoses too, because that's how we roll here. So of course, first of all, we'll take off this air intake. 8mm 5/16 or a flat blade screwdriver right there, and the other side too, right here. And then this clip here, there's on the back side, you can push a little tab and release it. I'll show you that more when it's off. So we're going to take this off, disconnect this hose. Slides on and slides off. All right, and we'll get that off. Let's just pull this off over here. That's what you're doing right here. Pull into release. So now, here's what you're looking at. You got 2 belts down there. They will actually help you hold the water pump pulley probably in place while you break loose the 4 10mm bolts for the water pump pulley. So something to consider is, I don't know how old your belts are. If they're old and cracked, you might as well replace them. But if they're recently replaced and coolant hasn't gotten on them, maybe the water pump's just loose or something. I'm actually doing another truck that has loose. Bearings have gone bad on it. And this one's not loose, but it's making some noise once in a while. So we're going to replace it. So you may consider taking the belts off first before you get coolant on them to save yourself 20 to 40 bucks. Otherwise, if you don't care about getting coolant on them, just start ripping stuff off. And then, yeah. So we're probably going to take this clamp off. We are going to be replacing these pieces in here. So that might be a little different from what you're doing, but we're going to replace these plastic pieces. So pliers here. We'll probably get a screwdriver. Maybe pick this out here. Nope. Pliers for this. Pliers for this. And then there'll be a couple 8mm bolts down there on the thermostat housing. And in theory, if you're not going to replace anything but the water pump, you can take out the 2 8mm bolts, take this off, and you can just pull this all off to the side and get to your water pump with all of this still connected. Thermostat housing, everything can just sit off to the side and you do your water pump. But in this video, you will not see that. We'll be taking those things off because it will replace some stuff. Here's the tensioner on the driver's side, 15mm wrench or socket and a ratchet. Counterclockwise to loosen and take the belt off. Over here. Sorry about the shaking. Got a 3/8 extension and ratchet. And we just lift up to loosen. So clockwise on the passenger side and counterclockwise on the driver's side. Then you can take your belts off as needed. And we did break the 10mm bolts loose on the water pump with the belts on. Just broke them loose with a 10mm wrench. So they're all loose and we can proceed. So again, I'll be replacing this and this upper hose. So I'll be taking it off there and here, even though the thermostat housing has to be unbolted to 8mm bolts. So I'll be showing you those in a little more detail in a bit probably. Clockwise to loosen with your 3/8, counterclockwise to loosen with your 15mm. And you do actually need to remove the probably 15mm bolt on the tensioner, or loosen it so that tensioner assembly is loose and you can squeeze the AC belt, the passenger side belt, through there, because it looks like it's too tight to get through. It's better just to loosen that bolt up and loosen the tensioner and get it to wobble and move the belt that way. Alright, so I got the two 8mm bolts out of here. Got a coolant container down below catching what I can of the coolant. Not a perfect shot. Got this clamp off here. See, it kind of holds itself expanded. Take some finesse. I do have a hook tool to loosen up the hose here to get it off. Sometimes a good amount of twisting will allow it to come off, and other times not so much. So there we go. Make sure your water pump kit comes with this O-ring. Although I put my finger on it, I can feel quite a bump on here, so I don't know if they have any issues with them splitting, but right now it feels pretty good. I wouldn't necessarily need to replace it, although we are. So there's that out of the way. Got the upper hose off of here. Just slide these clips back. I'll show you a little closer detail later. Ooh. I'm going to take the pulley off. Take this 8mm bolt out of here, and we can work this pipe up and out. There's an O-ring on this pipe as well. I probably didn't have to take this clamp off. We can just leave the clamp in place. Leave it in place. Just work this up. Get a few twists. Ta-da! Just an O-ring on there as well. Feels pretty good, but best is to replace them. Black paint on there. All right, we'll just tuck this off to the side, up here out of the way. We have our 4 10mm bolts for the pulley, and then 10mm bolts for the water pump, and it will be off. I use a ratchet, a 10mm, and probably an extension like this. That's an 8mm. I'll just switch out a 10mm and zip everything off. Again, all bolts are left to loosen, right to tighten. He's out there right now, yeah. A little rust buildup. All right, and we will zip off the maybe 6 water pump bolts. The water pump actually goes into the engine, so we will be pulling it as straight out as possible. Put a pry bar over here. Maybe get a little pry. I'm not sure how hard or easy it's going to come out. There's actually a tab up here. You could use it for prying up here as well. Let's put a pry bar on this side and pull with my other hand. Use my screwdriver because on the other side of here there's another tab like this you can use to pry with the screwdriver. Ooh. Ooh. A little vigorous shaking to try and get it to loosen up a little bit. Just have the friction of the O-ring around the water pump holding it in. Whew. Sounds like a plan, man. Ooh. Trying to work this out here. It's coming. Got a crow's foot pry bar on one side, and you see my pry bar over here. Come on, baby. Whew. Fighting me for sure.
Otter tech, can you hold please? Thanks. How is there in the last 45 minutes?
Verizon might have a blocking service to pay for, maybe. Ugh. Crazy. Can see the O-ring. Water pump out. Can maybe wipe that out a little bit on the inside there. Should be good. New water pump. Put a little silicone or maybe a little bit of grease before you install it to make it go on easier. They're probably going to say use coolant. but something a little slipperier is going to be better, and you want to make sure you put this in as straight as possible. Don't get it cockeyed. And again, 4 bolts. So there we go. Out. So we have our old one and our new one. So we've got the clip, just pulls in and out. You can see it fits nicely in a groove when it's pulled in the proper spot. One trick thing though to be aware of, it does have a groove. See it on the camera, the lighting. There's a groove on here. It matches up with the groove. So when you're trying to put 2 pieces together, make sure you line up the grooves so they can snap together. These won't go together, but just an example. Groove and slot, they need to go together. Otherwise, you're going to be cursing and swearing and having problems. So there's a single O-ring in here. You could actually replace the O-ring in here if you want. But over time, these plastic crimps do give up the ghost, and they do leak too, so that's really why we're replacing it. Prevent that future problem. I think that's it. Clip snaps in. Probably leave it like that. Push it onto your new piece, and it'll maybe snap into place. Or you can leave it up in the up position like I had. Get a screwdriver in here. When you're using these clamps, if you don't replace them, try and make sure you get the clamp back in this position. I've seen different times where you have the clamp in a different spot and it leaks, so your best bet of not having a leak is to put the clamp in the same groove it came from. And of course, best practice is to replace them. So I believe when they talk about installing your water pump too, they don't want you turning it. So maybe put it into place as close as you can and get the bolts. Make sure everything's lined up, put the bolts in, and then you can maybe try and push it in a little bit. And I might draw it in actually with the bolts a turn or 2 at a time. So, but they don't want you turning it. The aluminum can cut the O-ring and then you'll have a leak. So I think that's some helpful tips, and we'll be putting it back together. Instructions say to lubricate with coolant and put the pipe in, put the water pump in. Make sure you're before you really push it in though, just put it in the hole and then line up your bolt holes and make sure they're all started a turn or 2 probably, so they're all in place, and don't rotate it. And I want you to tighten the bolts to 177 inch-pounds, also known as 20 Newton meters. And after you've done that, then they want you to tighten each bolt an additional 60 degrees of rotation. I've got my water pump bolts all started. You can see the black O-ring on there still. So if I think that I can brute force it in, I will just push it in. I did use some silicone spray on that O-ring. So basically just going to try and push it in, I guess. Otherwise I'll just do a turn at a time on those bolts and crisscross them and slowly draw it in. I think that probably would work. I mean, what are you going to do if you can't push it in? So that's what I'll be doing. So yeah, I'm just going to try and use a 1/4-inch ratchet and 10mm socket and draw it in carefully. Just a turn or two a turn at a time probably. Looks like the bottom needs to come in really. Might be a little cockeyed. Very difficult to push it in straight myself. Just don't overdo it. If you feel some resistance, move to another bolt. I think that's the best way to do it. Seems to be coming up together really nice. Don't see any more gaps, so we'll do the torque specs and the degrees previously talked about. So torque them, reverse procedure to install, put your belts on, put your tensioner or tensioners on if you took them off, and water pump pulley. Torque them down, put the water pump pulley on. We'll put our belts on and put the tensioner on as well. If you did take it off, make sure you put that belt on first, then that belt. I'll give you some torque specs after this, but I'm sure you can put it back together the way you found it. Review the video as needed. So if you do manage to get this locked on the stage right here where it stays loose, you can just use a screwdriver, put it in here, and then lean it to the left and push down on this, and it'll separate it. It'll separate it and snap into place like that. So this is up here, caught on it, it's loose, and you can push this on here and snap it over. Push down on that and pull up on that, it'll snap into place. It's all back together. Then we'll add a nice 50-50 mix of coolant into the overflow jug, maybe 1.5 gallons total, something like that. I'll let you know how much I put in. $18 foot-pounds for the water pump bolts. Those 89 inch-pounds for the thermostat housing, and probably for that bolt as well, 89 inch-pounds. I think those are the torque specs you need. And we'll put it back together and add some coolant. So there's a cold fill range right there. I like to use a flashlight to try and highlight it where the coolant might be. Give it a shake. I think I'm in a good spot there. About 1 gallon of Ford Orange and about 1 gallon of water for my 50-50 mix. We'll put the cap on and run it. We'll put the inside vehicle on hot and blow it through the vent so it can feel the heat, and in about 5-10 minutes you should start to feel some warmth coming through the vents. And keep an eye on the temperature gauge as well. Water pump for 2014 5.0 liter Fords, 3 bolts. Water pump for 2011 12 13, 4 bolts for the water pump pulley. That seems to be really the only serious difference as far as remove and replace. Just like that.